So welcome again to Neurotransmitters. Today we're going to talk about tumor necrosis alpha, or what we generally call TNF-alpha. It's not technically a neurotransmitter, but it's snuck in here as a signaling agent. So TNF-alpha is one of the primary cytokines, proinflammatory, or inflammatory agents within the body. And it's kind of high on the inflammatory cascade, which means that it actually signals other inflammatory agents, right? And it's really important for us when we get sick that we have inflammation that helps us to fight off infection. I'm not going to go into all of that right now, but it is really, really essential. However, we know that we can actually trigger the release of inflammatory agents when we're not sick. In fact, Stephen Cole has demonstrated that when we feel either socially isolated or we feel that we've had an emotional attack, that the body releases inflammatory agents in preparation for a potential bacterial infection, because the body can't differentiate, well, it sort of can, of course, but at some levels cannot differentiate between an emotional and a physical onslaught. So TNF-alpha can be released in many different situations. And like I said, it signals other things. It's on the top of the inflammatory cascade. Now, I want to add another piece of information, and we'll come right back to TNF-alpha. So the brain is encased in a blood-brain barrier, right? And that's really important. It protects the brain from many of the things that flow through the body from entering the brain, which may be dangerous. So there's this kind of selective membrane, and that helps us from infections entering the brain, and infections that can enter the brain are often lethal. And the one part of your brain that is actually in direct contact with your bloodstream is the posterior part of your pituitary gland, right, which is the master gland of your endocrine system, of your hormonal system. So what it does through the bloodstream is it releases hormones that activate other endocrine glands and give rise to the various different endocrinological effects that we have within the body. But it can be a two-way street. And we know that TNF-alpha can actually enter the brain through the pituitary gland. And I wish I could say that was good news, but it's not. Because what happens is, yes, there could be an increase in inflammation, but we know that TNF-alpha in the brain actually activates other neurotransmitters and other systems that can lead to depressive experience. So inflammation can actually make us feel depressed. And this is well understood and respected now by the field of psychiatry. Now, what does this have to do with yoga? Well, we know that yoga releases inhibitory mechanisms for inflammatory agents. Specifically, the vagus releases acetylcholine, and acetylcholine is inhibitory to things like pro-inflammatory cytokines like TNF-alpha. And so it may provide a protective mechanism against the overall negative effects of inflammation, which are risk factors in many different disease states, as well as the depressive experience that can arise in conjunction with it. So even though we're not saying the best thing about TNF-alpha, thanks for helping us out with information when we need it, and let's curb you so you're not overactive. Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed.